Ivanka feels very strongly. My wife feels very strongly about it. I feel very strongly about it. I think anybody with a heart would feel very strongly about it. We don't like to see families separated.
I bet you've been separating them now. In fact, if you have a heart, there are 2,300 plus young children.
That
a lot
need
of
their
them,
parents.
A lot of them infants.
Families.
A lot of them toddlers. A lot of them young, the same age as some of your grandchildren who were separated from their parents right now.
Can't see them.
Separated from their parents. The parents can't see them. In fact, Mr. President, your centralized state-run government will not allow anybody in to see them in the press. Won't allow Americans to see the condition by which those toddlers, that's what I said, infants and toddlers and young girls are being incarcerated by the United States government.
Yeah.
Anyway, as these firestorms over family separations played out, President Trump's daughter and senior White House advisor Ivanka Trump remained silent. She commented for the first time only on the topic yesterday, tweeting, "Thank you, POTUS, for taking critical action, ending family separation at our borders. Congress must now act and find a lasting solution that's consistent with our shared values, the same values that so many come here seeking as they endeavor to create a better life for their family." Ivanka Trump, who once billed herself as a force for good in the administration, was publicly silent on this issue prior to that tweet. White House spokesman Raj Shah said Ivanka Trump made calls to congressional leaders advocating for a fix. Jonathan Lemire also, you saw that after that tweet, she was met with a great deal of hostility, not only in Twitter, but also from others who thought that, reports, which we'll be talking about later, coming out that she'd been saying for a week, asking inside the White House, should I speak out on this issue or not? Should I speak out on this issue or not? She spoke out afterwards, and the reaction was harsh.
Right. And it's her silence amid the crisis that is so striking. And it's not the first time she has done this. Remember, Ivanka Trump, when she took this position, said, as you just read from our story, that she wanted to be a force for good. A lot of people thought she might be a moderating influence on the president, but at the very least, that she would advocate for issues about family, about children. She has said that that's what she wanted to do. That's the mark she wanted to leave in her role in the West Wing. And that has not been the case. Her silence here during this crisis, is reminiscent of what she's done before. Remember, she also bit her tongue during the Charlottesville crisis last summer, when the president said there are good people on both sides of that violence, which meant neo-Nazis and KKK members. Ivanka Trump here, and we've seen the White House do this repeatedly, where after the fact, suddenly there's the spin. People close to Ivanka, White House officials, anonymous aides will tell us, yes, the first daughter was there advocating behind the scenes to move her father in a certain way. Sometimes she's effective, sometimes she's not.
And yet it was Melania who actually spoke out here. It was Melania who spoke out in real time,
knowing the difference,
and putting real pressure on the president to move.
That's right. Her words, which happened before this executive order was signed, before the decision was made to reverse this policy, seemed to carry far more weight instead of the first daughter, who almost seemed to try to claim a victory after the fact. And I think it was striking that the president, in a closed-door meeting with Republicans a few days ago, said for the first time, yes, my daughter has said this looks bad, you should try to change it.
Yeah.
But we didn't hear that from Ivanka herself.
Yeah, and Willie, we've known Ivanka and Eric and Don for quite some time, and they had a very good reputation around New York. Always polite, always courteous, always actually pretty humble, well-mannered for billionaires' kids. It's amazing how much things have changed, and it's pretty remarkable that time and again, Ivanka, who went in to be a voice for good and to champion children and women, she has remained silent through some of the most horrific episodes in recent American history involving, well, first of all, what the president says about women. The shocking, insulting things said about women. But as Jonathan said, after Charlottesville. And now, after this, you have infants and toddlers and young girls being incarcerated, and we don't know where they are. And she hasn't spoken out.
It's become a Washington cliche, as Jonathan points out, that at the end of all these stories, there's always reporting that says Ivanka Trump pressured her father. She was the one who was trying to put her thumb on the scale to be on the right side of history. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Remember, she's not just the president's daughter. As Emily Jane Fox writes in her excellent new book, Ivanka Trump enthusiastically leapt into the role of senior advisor to the president. She is a senior advisor. She's no longer just the daughter of the President of the United States. She represents the White House publicly. For her not to speak out and for her then to push stories after the fact where she says, I tried my best, I put pressure on my father in the way only I can, and this time it didn't work out, it's just not enough. So you can either be the president's daughter, and that's fine. I don't expect Tiffany Trump to come out and speak on every issue, or you can be the senior advisor to the president who has presented herself as an advocate for women and families.
Yeah.
And there's no better story here for women and families than the one we're talking about.
I don't think the right criticism is why she did not speak out. I think the right criticism is how she let this policy come into effect to begin with. She is a senior advisor to the president, which means she has a role in creating policy in the White House before it gets instituted. I think it's not unfair, but most advisors are not told that they should speak out in real time against the president's own policy. What the real criticism is if she has any influence, if she has any know-how, if she has any interest in policy, why is she allowing these things to come into effect in the first place?
Right. And Mika,
sure.
We early on, I know you talked to Ivanka a lot. You actually got Dina Powell over to meet with Ivanka when Ivanka wanted somebody to help her on her
Setting up a
efforts
platform for women?
for women,
Yeah.
and for children, and so there were a lot of things said during the transition about a lot of things that were going to be done, but there's been an awful lot of silence in times of moral crisis, and you actually. You communicate with her yesterday?
I did. So first of all, as Charlottesville and a lot of different events happened during this presidency that were pretty devastating to watch, I was always very sad about sort of the fact that she didn't step up. But as you're right, Sam, as a counselor to the president, even in that role, it's not necessarily your place. But she's got a very different role than anybody else, being the president's daughter, and also putting herself out there as someone who can really help sort of soften the edges. Mm-hmm. And she hasn't done any of that. Or if she has, then good Lord, what would we have gotten? But aside from that, I stopped communicating with her because nothing seemed to be sticking. And everything she said she wanted to do never happened. Not one bit. And Dina, who would never say it didn't work, she was moved over to the National Security Council. I will tell you, it didn't work. And Dina's incredibly talented, so it wasn't on Dina. Ivanka called yesterday, and I've been speaking to her, posting comments on her Instagram, so I can be sure that she reads them, letting her know that we really need to hear from her as a spokesperson on families and mothers and babies, to tell the world that she believes this policy is wrong, that somebody does need to step up to this president. Somebody does need to come forward and tell him that this is inhumane. Please be the person. Take this moment in your life to jump out of the Trump box and do what's right for America. And I tried to communicate with her on her Instagram. She did not erase it, but she did not respond. And then yesterday she called. I guess maybe she was making calls, making the rounds to talk about this executive order. But the question still is, where are the girls? Where are the toddlers? What about these thousands of children?
Did you talk to her?
So I didn't, but I texted her, and I have it right here because I wanted to talk to her, but I wanted to make it very clear the parameters of this conversation would be very clear, and that I wasn't going to be just a trusting anymore, and that I've lost trust. And I said, unless you can tell me where the little girls and toddlers are, and the intention of this administration is to reunite these families right away now, that there's nothing to talk about, and that I've lost trust. And I asked her to speak out for women and for mothers and for babies, and if she could do that, I would be happy to talk to her on the record. And then she wrote me back off the record, so I won't mention what she wrote off the record because that would be wrong, but it was really just kind of a placating group of sentences, some that didn't make sense, but basically saying talk is cheap or that she was making efforts. And so I wrote back on the record, unless you can speak out in public for mothers and women and babies, and that she might want to understand that this is her moment to talk about the ideals that this country was created on, the morals that this country holds close for the rest of the world. And if she could show the world that she cares about mothers and children, that would be good. And that if she can't, that no one's going to ever respect her again, because this whole thing has been a joke. This position that she holds is a joke.
This is a defining moment, actually, for this administration, much as Katrina was. I talked to so many good people that worked for George W. Bush, that dedicated their lives to George W. Bush, who told me after, as much as they still love the man, that that was the defining moment of their presidency,
It will
Katrina.
stay with them forever.
And that they were still talking about it 5 years later, heartbroken that they didn't step up and do more during that time. And Heidi, this is that time for Ivanka Trump. This is that time for Kirstjen Nielsen. That is this time for every member, if they don't step forward right now and be counted. As I told many people during the Bush administration when they were angry at me for criticizing them on massive debts and Katrina and other things, I said, he's going to be gone. You're still going to be in Washington, and you're going to be defined by how you respond now. They didn't respond the way they wanted to. They regretted it the rest of their lives. And maybe Ivanka Trump stepping up and taking charge of reuniting those 2,300
managing it,
children,
asking the
those
questions.
lost children, those lost toddlers, those lost infants, those lost young girls. Maybe she can step up and aggressively take charge of that part of it and reunite these families. That would be using her position.
Only she knows what the true relationship and dynamic is between her and her father. And I'm going to say something here that is not out of the realm of possibility, that the patriarchal pull in this family really is so strong that she does feel intimidated, that she does feel like she can't do this. She can do this. This is a moment, Joe. Like you said, this moment has not passed. This is the opportunity now, because there are 2,300 children who are sitting somewhere, either in a detention facility or they've been sent out to American families, and their parents are in the process of being deported. Some of them already have been deported. We know that because we've seen one mother in Guatemala on television, her eyes swollen, her child, her son, somewhere, she doesn't know where he is, here in the United States.
Lost
She's
children.
already been deported.
Yeah.
Correct. And like we talked about in the break, there are ways to do this. There's DNA tests, but how many of these parents are going to be deported without their children?
Well, and Richard, for those saying it's unfair to attack a president's daughter, I would say just what Mika said. We're not talking about Tiffany. We're talking about Ivanka, who decided to go into the White House, be the top counselor to the President of the United States. And just as Bobby Kennedy was roundly criticized when he became Attorney General for his brother, if you are in the arena, if you take that position, then you have to be held accountable by the American people.
Absolutely. You can't have it both ways. You can't basically do certain things as a White House advisor, and then when criticism or flack comes your way, say, oh, I'm only the president's daughter, it's not fair. You've got to be out there. She's on the payroll, so to speak. She has security clearances. She has official responsibilities. And if she sends, like she did yesterday, a cheerleading tweet giving her father credit for ending the crisis, that's a political statement. But I think Heidi's right. Why don't we think about a massive program of genetic testing or whatever it would take to reunite these kids? That would be something positive. As I mentioned before, why don't we think about a serious trade and aid policy to try to address some of the problems in these countries that are leading people to flee for their lives? There's so much that could be done, both to deal with the consequences of what we've just experienced and to prevent it from recurring.
Because she should get on a plane this morning and go down.
Go to the border.
It's not that
Say,
hard.
where are they?
Get on a plane,
I want to see
go
the
down
girls.
there, let Mariana Atencio or Jacob Soboroff or one of our reporters come in with the camera, take a tour of the place, sit down, do an interview, and find out what's happening and show the country what's happening in the
If you
centers.
care
But why she
about
won't do it
this-
is she doesn't want to embarrass her dad.
Oh, no, if you care
Us,
about
the
this,
lost children.
do what you can do. Everybody who cares about this is doing what they can do. There are legal aid organizations doing what they can do. There are doctors stepping up. We want to foster one of these children as they wait wherever they are. We just want to know where they are, and we will use this platform to ask again and again and again, where are the girls and where are the toddlers? What can you do? You can go to the border as the president's counselor on women and families and children, and you can stand there and wait until something is done. Step up. It's not about you, and it's not about your dad. It's about the country.
And-
Do what's right.
And we will be the first, of course, to salute and praise, as will everybody
course.
else. The first person that can go down and has the power, has the authority to go down and show us where these lost children are, where these hidden children are, where these 2,300 kids are, these toddlers, these infants, these young girls, these young boys who've been separated from their parents. Take charge of that. Be the first to praise whoever can do that, because that's not only good for those children, that's good for the United States of America's reputation, not only here, but across the globe.
Coming up, aside from the human toll, what's the political damage from this ugly episode in our history? We'll talk about what it means for Republicans this November. We're back in a moment.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.